We begin, though, this morning with the war in Ukraine, where troops are mounting a counteroffensive against Russian forces in the region of Kharkiv.
The area is home to Ukraine's second largest city, which has come under heavy shelling since the invasion began. But President Zelensky said the Ukrainian army has managed to push back Russian troops in the region and recapture some villages north of the city. On Capitol Hill overnight, the House approved a $40 billion Ukraine aid package, which includes both military and humanitarian funding. It comes after the director of national intelligence warned that President Putin could use nuclear weapons if he perceived an existential threat to Russia. Speaking yesterday, she told a Senate committee hearing that the Russian leader is preparing for a long war in Ukraine.
We assess President Putin is preparing for a prolonged conflict in Ukraine, during which he still intends to achieve goals beyond the Donbass. But Putin most likely also judges that Russia has a greater ability and willingness to endure challenges than his adversaries, and he is probably counting on U.S. and EU resolve to weaken as food shortages, inflation, energy prices get worse. Moreover, as both Russia and Ukraine believe they can continue to make progress militarily, we do not see a viable negotiating path forward, at least in the short term.
No viable negotiating path. We will hear from the former director for Russia and Eastern Europe at the National Security Council, Colonel Matt Dimick, in just a few moments. But first, let's go to NBC News senior national correspondent Jay Gray, who's in Lviv. Jay, we know Kharkiv and the surrounding region have seen some of the fiercest fighting since this war began. What can you tell us about this latest Ukrainian counterattack?
Yeah, it seems to be working at this point, as you talked about, Vicky. Still very tense in that area, as you might imagine. In fact, one civilian killed during a volley yesterday on the streets of one of those outlying towns or villages. Ukraine fighters have managed to push back Russian tactical units, though, taking back some of the land that they had taken over during the initial invasion. And really securing an area around Ukraine's second largest city, though the fighting does continue at times to be very intense, and the Russians still continue to try and push back in and toward that city. It's not something that they've been ready to fully give up on, as they continue, of course, pounding the east as well. And so we can expect to continue to see fighting in that region for quite some time.
Jay, this morning, the wounded soldiers trapped inside that Mariupol steel plant made a new plea for help. What are they saying about the conditions there? And do we know of any plans to evacuate them as well? I think yesterday you told us at least 100 civilians are believed to still be trapped inside.
Yeah, Vicky, we're getting mixed reports on the number of civilians inside, but it appears now that there are some still inside that steel plant. The situation not good for those wounded soldiers. There are many with severe wounds, some with amputations. They have no medical care, no medicine, and no gauze or bandaging that is sterilized. They're just using what they can there. The UN has continued to try and negotiate some type of ceasefire to get those soldiers out, to get them to the medical attention that they may need. At this point, though, Russian troops have refused to call a ceasefire for those purposes. As you know, they transported a lot of the civilians out over the weekend during what was a very tenuous humanitarian corridor, but managed to get the majority of folks out of that steel mill. And so they'll continue, the UN says, to try and get that safe passage. But again, it's been a sticking point for weeks, and it doesn't look like there's any give right now.
Jay, we're also hearing Ukraine is planning to suspend the flow of gas at a key transit point that delivers about a third of the fuel from Russia to Europe. How quickly could that happen, and what kind of impact would that have on Russia and its war efforts?
Yeah, it looks like the process has already started, Vicky, and the Ukraine officials have been warning European allies about this for the last couple of weeks. The issue is the pipeline runs through an area where there is Russian occupation or intense fighting, and so they can't get out. They can't make sure it's serviced properly, can't make sure that everything is okay as far as the flow is concerned. And they say that some of the Russian troops have actually been tapping into the source, and that makes it a bit uneven and a bit dicey as well. So they've offered to reroute the gas. Russia has said no, that's not technically possible. They've also said that there's no reason to shut down the flow.
Jay Gray, live in Lviv. Thank you.
Let's now bring in Colonel Matt Dimick. He's the former director for Russia and Eastern Europe at the National Security Council, a position he held during both the Trump and Biden administrations. Good morning. Thanks for being with us. So let's start with this $40 billion aid package just passed by the House, because it's actually $7 billion more than President Biden has requested. What does that say to you about America's commitment to the fight? What does it say to Russia? And ultimately, what's the impact this can have?
So it's a huge amount of money, obviously. And then when you combine it with the other billions of dollars that have already been committed to Ukraine, the sum is very, very large. But I think what it constitutes is this is really an insurance premium for America, for our national security interests, and that's really the way we need to look at it. All of that money in the hands of the Ukrainians is necessary. It's going to go to good use, and I think that we should look at this as every dollar that we put into the hands of the Ukrainians, it gives them the tools to beat back Russian aggression and smash up the Russian war machine. Not only is it a dollar well spent, but it's going to be an investment in our future security in Europe and protect our interests in the long term.
Certainly, and you can see the breakdown there we just have on the screen of how it will all be spent. Now, let's talk about what we heard from the Director of National Intelligence, warning that Putin may become more unpredictable, is dug in for a long war with also a no viable negotiating path she had mentioned there. What concerns you most about what Putin may do next?
I don't necessarily have any concerns about some kind of irrational escalation of this conflict. It looks like he's just going to continue on this path of just a sheer slog towards some kind of victory that he can claim. So it looks like he's going to just continue this plotting pace of the conflict, use the Russian strengths of mass and heavy firepower to just try to grind down the Ukrainians, and in combination with pushing back Ukrainians and destroying some of the Ukrainian forces and working through attrition, also just a stranglehold on the Ukrainian economy. And I think that Putin probably thinks if he can make this last for several more months, put more pain on the Ukrainians, and maybe also Europeans and everybody else loses some interest, then he will eventually be able to claim his military objectives.
So let's talk about exactly what those military objectives are at this point, and also what it ultimately means Ukraine would have to be okay with, because we've seen the Russian army shift its goals from Kyiv to just the eastern region. Now they're facing that fierce resistance, just talking about them pushing back in Kharkiv. It seems that they want that land corridor to Crimea, but Zelensky said he's not going to give it up, and also his people live there. I mean, what is the off-ramp here, and is there any solution you see that could also satisfy Ukraine?
It is hard to see, because right now both sides see a path towards their own sense of victory and being able to impose conditions on the other side. So it's hard to see any off-ramps at this point in time. I think the Russians believe that time and mass is in their favor. So they are sitting on that ground, probably about 80% of the Donbass at this point, and they're definitely in control of the entire Sea of Azov all the way to the Black Sea coast at Kherson. So they are in somewhat of a good position as far as controlling land, but Ukrainians are going to have something to say about that. And as you've seen around Kharkiv, they do have the ability. They're very nimble and can give the Russians some setbacks that the Russians may have to consider. But when it comes to off-ramps, I think Putin thinks time is in his favor, mass is in his favor, and that he will be able to strangle the Ukrainians into coming to the table and accepting favorable Russian agreements.
Colonel Matt Dimick, thank you for your time this morning. Also, I know you're a regional program director with the aid group Spirit of America that's helping get aid into Ukraine. Thank you for what you're doing there, too. We appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
We turn now to the battle over the future of abortion rights in the U.S. Today, the Senate is expected to vote on a bill that would codify abortion rights. The vote on the Women's Health Protection Act, which has already passed the House, is all but certain to fail, with just 49 senators expected to support the measure. That is well below the 60-vote requirement to defeat a Republican filibuster. The vote comes after that leaked Supreme Court draft opinion that indicates Roe v. Wade will likely be overturned. Meanwhile, several states are racing to extend their abortion laws to protect out-of-state patients from potential lawsuits. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has more now from Connecticut.
There's a new abortion law in Connecticut.
We're doing everything we can to stand up on behalf of the reproductive rights of all of our citizens.
Setting up a battle between states.
Texas, don't mess with Connecticut.
The law expands abortion access and protects providers, like those in this clinic, from being sued or even criminally charged by another state.
I am very grateful for it, and I think it was necessary in our political climate.
We're not going to sit here with our residents, with our doctors, nurses, our facilities undefended. We're going to stand up for these rights here in the state of Connecticut.
State Representative Matt Blumenthal, who co-authored the bill, says it was in direct response to the abortion law in Texas and in anticipation of Roe v. Wade possibly being overturned.
People are already coming to Connecticut from places like Texas to seek safe and legal care.
Missouri State Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman drafted a bill similar to the one in Texas that would allow private citizens to sue abortion providers.
Should a doctor in Connecticut be concerned that they may be sued from a private citizen in Missouri if they've performed an abortion on a Missouri resident?
No, I don't think that that's an accurate reading of the law.
Her bill has not yet been passed.
Because the abortion issue has been decided by the courts for so long, that taking this back into the state legislatures, there's rhetoric that is ramping things up in ways that isn't particularly helpful.
Scholars say the criminal and civil law has not been tested, and anti-abortion states might push boundaries if Roe is overturned, which is why states like Connecticut are acting quickly.
You see Connecticut looking at that kind of mess and saying, we want clarity. We don't want to wait for things to shake out in the courts.
What kind of world are we potentially going into if Roe is overturned?
I'm afraid that it's going to be a world where this conflict is even uglier and messier than the one we're in now.
Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, Hartford, Connecticut.
Turning now to the economy and the new inflation numbers out today. Americans have been hit hard, paying more for everyday items. Inflation's been at its highest point in more than 40 years, in fact. Well, yesterday, President Biden unveiled his plan to try to ease the burden on Americans' wallets.
My plan attacks inflation and grows the economy by lowering costs for working families, giving workers well-deserved raises, reducing the deficit by historic levels, and making big corporations and the very wealthiest Americans pay their fair share.
But how do voters feel about the rising prices? Well, we're 6 months away from midterm elections, and in key swing states, inflation and the economy are playing a major role in who people may vote for in November. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us from one of those key swing states, Florida. He's in Duval County, the greater Jacksonville area, for our County to County series. Shaq, good morning. So just tell me, how are people there seeing the impact of inflation right now?
Well, you're looking at gas prices, increased food prices, increased housing prices, especially in this area. Housing up 30% in Jacksonville area from just a year ago. So this is something that voters are thinking about ahead of the midterm elections. It's in fact something that they brought up to us during our first visit here last October. I want you to listen to what they're telling us about the impact of inflation, starting with a person we met back in October who mentioned this as one of her top issues then. Listen to what she's saying now.
Worse. Worse.
How so?
Well, obviously, a lot of my friends are talking about the gas prices and being able to travel this summer.
In the grocery store as well, sort of picking and choosing my battles now with what I really need versus what I want as the prices increase.
This is something that increasingly voters are saying is top of mind to them, and that's why you heard the president yesterday saying this is his top domestic priority at this point.
So, Shaq, groceries cost more, travel's going to be tougher. That's all frustrating and stressful for people. So the question, as we set you up for, is how is it going to impact how they vote this time around? And this is an especially interesting area to watch to get an answer to that, because it's historically quite Republican. That's seen some shift with Biden even winning in 2020. How's inflation impacting how this is shaping up for midterms?
Right. This is the type of area that Democrats felt that they had some momentum in. But now with the economy, with inflation, it's Republicans feeling like they have the wind at their backs. And, you know, we actually stopped by a food bank. And one thing that we saw learning and talking to folks there is that most of the people going in to get food have a source of income. These are people who are seniors, who are on fixed income, so they are feeling it in their day-to-day lives. I want you to listen to my conversation with a voter who we met, who's explaining who he's blaming for this, who he blames for the rise in prices that you're seeing.
I didn't agree with the last stimulus, because the market was moving, in the right direction in regards to inflation. But going forward right now, I think everyone just needs to come together and figure this thing out. I don't think one party can fix it. I think both of them have to come together.
Other voters that I talked to mentioned the coronavirus pandemic, or they said it's just cyclical. It's something that will rise and fall. But again, this is something that every voter, no matter what side of the aisle they fall on, said they noticed and they'll be thinking about into the midterm elections.
Absolutely. So, Shaq, quickly tell us what they think of the plan unveiled yesterday to try to combat this.
Well, a little quick, it's that plan was just announced yesterday. We just heard from the president yesterday, so we don't have immediate reaction to what the president said. But if you look at this poll that we saw from last night, you see most people in this state, the number is 76% of Floridians are very or somewhat dissatisfied with the government's handling of the issue. When you ask them who they blame for it, you see that the Biden administration is at about 64%. They say are very or somewhat responsible, putting the blame on Biden administration. But they also see other issues at play. They look at the coronavirus pandemic. They look at the supply chain issues. So there's many people to blame, but you get the sense that voters are really paying attention to this. And that is why you have the president and folks in Congress focusing on this issue as we get closer and closer to the election.
Absolutely, and we will continue to focus on that county. Lots to watch for there. Shaq Brewster, thank you so much.
Well, future homeowners are also struggling in this economy. Rising mortgage rates are forcing many to delay the purchase of that new dream home. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer takes a closer look at the housing crunch.
So this is my favorite room in the house.
As rents rise and now mortgage rates climb, the Fishers, like so many other American families, are trying desperately to buy a home while facing a tougher housing market every day. With low inventory and record high prices, if they wait any longer, their 30-year fixed mortgage could tick up even higher.
We're definitely willing to make more sacrifices than we were at the beginning.
The typical mortgage payment in March was $1,700, up nearly $400 from a year ago.
Yeah, you kind of don't know when it's going to end with the mortgage rates rising. With inflation going up too, I mean, everything's getting more expensive.
Though the housing market remains hot, there are some signs of cooling. The average 30-year fixed mortgage rate has now climbed to 5.36%, up 2 points from a year ago. That's led to an 11% drop in new mortgage applications. Still, many prospective homeowners are lowering expectations and raising budgets.
It's definitely squeezing some people out, but again, demand is still there and it's far exceeding supply.
To get their foot into the door, families aren't just willing to pay more for less. Many are turning to adjustable rate loans, where the interest rate can change after 5, 7, or 10 years.
We think in 2022, with higher mortgage rates, that'll cool down somewhat. We'll be back to more typical market conditions.
But after losing on multiple offers, the Fisher family wants to buy now in order to save later, or else they worry their American dream could become a nightmare. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And now it's time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Our Michelle Grossman joins us this morning. Hey, good morning. A lot of reds, pinks, and oranges behind you.
What's going on? Are we still super busy?
We are still super busy. Hi there, guys. And yeah, a lot of pink and red because we are looking at really warm temperatures. We are so hot from the southern plains all the way to the Midwest, even into the interior parts of Northeast. And we're looking at temperatures in the 90s, so well above normal for this time of year. St. Louis, 93 degrees today. That's 18 degrees above normal for this time of year. Some spots may even be as high as 30 degrees above normal. Buffalo, New York, 80 degrees. That's 14 degrees above average. Now, as we head towards tomorrow, we're going to see this heat expanding. So it's a big area of high pressure. Think of it as a heat pump just bringing in this Gulf air, and it's really hot. So 86 degrees in Burlington, Vermont tomorrow, 19 degrees above normal for this time of year. The good news is we're cooler. So as we head towards the end of the work week into the weekend, we're looking at temperatures into the low 70s in Milwaukee, even to the mid 60s. That's going to feel nice over the weekend. Cleveland, you're mainly in the mid 70s. This heat is going to spark some storms along with a front that's moving through. So we're looking at severe weather threats in western Texas, also in the Midwest. We're looking at 7 million at risk. The risk here is for damaging hail up to an inch, also gusty winds. We could see a few likely tornadoes in the Midwest. As we look towards the south in western Texas, it looks like the biggest concerns there will be wind and also hail. Then as we go throughout Thursday, we include a little more, so 10 million at risk. And we do have an enhanced risk. That's 3 out of 5 on the severe scale. So we could certainly see tornadoes tomorrow as well. Here is the setup as we go throughout the day. Here's that first cold front. That's going to be the trigger mechanism along with that warm air in place, also some Gulf moisture, and that's going to trigger some of those storms as we go throughout the afternoon and evening hours. Tomorrow, right on the heels of the first one, we have a secondary front that will also bring severe weather in pretty much the same spots. Because of that, because of really wet ground, we've had rain over and over again. In this part of the country, we are looking at the chance for some flooding, even up to 2 inches of rain in some spots. So there is a concern for the streams, the creeks, and the rivers. Talking about that heat once again, this is going to spark the chance for more fire danger today. So 10 million at risk. Where you see that hot pink color, we're looking at Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. We could see fire danger once again. And we're at a critical risk where you see the red, including Albuquerque. It's a combination of low humidity, gusty winds, and that warm air in place. So once again, we already have a lot of fires burning. We're going to add to that. And again, summertime, that is really when this fire season starts. So we're so ahead of the schedule.
Yeah, it's supposed to start then, but it seems like each year it kind of creeps up earlier and earlier.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. Also, that 2-inch hail gets me every time.
Every time.
I can imagine.
I know. Softball.
Yeah, exactly.
That's big.
All right, Michelle, see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.